Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I'm your host, Ike. And before you get too sucked into this awesome interview, do us both a favor and like, subscribe, and share this amazing piece of content. Because I am here with the one, the only, paTRICK Sullivan!
Pleasure. How you doing?
How are you doing this fine summer eve, my friend?
It's nice. It's a little hot out in Denver right now for my tastes for this time of evening, but it's pretty out, relaxing a little bit. You've accommodated my nocturnal and occasionally inflexible schedule, so I'm glad to finally get an opportunity to do this. Um, yeah, it's been a minute. You've been super patient, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. As long as you remembered to bring your favorite knock knock joke.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got it. You want that now?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so we gotta pretend. Um, I'm gonna pretend like I'm my infant daughter, and
Okay.
you will tell a knock knock joke.
Okay.
All right, go for it.
Knock knock.
It's a goat. That's my favorite. That's my favorite knock knock joke. So she's like, she's at the point now where she sort of understands the parameters of the joke, but something is lost in translation. So that's about as far as we get, and I think it's the funniest knock knock joke I've ever heard.
That's so adorable. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. Just
Uh,
turned 2 yesterday.
oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, speaking of children, let's rewind time a little bit. What's the best first date movie, or what was your first date movie, if you can recall?
Oh my God. So are we talking about I'm going to a movie with someone I am dating for the first time, or like a first date?
First date.
Okay. So I got set up on a date when I was 16, I think. I mean, so this is all high school, whatever, you know what I mean? So it's not nothing's like
Yeah.
serious. But my friend's like, oh, I
Mm,
got this gal. She goes to school a town over. I think you two would really hit it off. And
mm-hmm.
so it's like, okay, cool. So we meet up at the ball, Bridgewater Commons, and like within seconds, we're both like, no, this is like, there's no chance. This is like so annoying or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and we went and saw, I'm trying to think. So this is like 98. What would we have seen in the
Okay.
movie theater that was like mainstream, but sort of on the artsy slash like romantic side? I don't know. Something awful. Um, but
We've got The Truman Show, Patch Adams, Avengers, Blade,
no, I
uh,
remember it being
Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels, Saving Private Ryan, The Wedding
The
Singer.
Wedding Singer. There you go. You got it. So we went and we
Boom.
saw The Wedding Singer, and so this was after hanging out for whatever 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
And we
Great first date movie, by the way.
yeah we both ditched each other. We were like, I was like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and she's like, yeah, that's it. I'm gonna go too. And then neither of us went back to our seat. Just drove
We
back
both
up.
saw each other trying to get into your collective cars.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hey.
Yeah. So that was my first date movie, I guess technically. Prior to that,
Oh, that's so awesome.
prior to that, there was trying to think. I was sophomore in high school, I want to say,
Hmm.
and went and saw the Titanic with the following group: me, my girlfriend, her best friend, and her boyfriend, and the her parents and her friend's parents. So we're like opposite sides. So it's like opposite sides of the movie theater, right? Like they're not sitting next to us. We're at
Yeah.
least that old, but like so my girlfriend's friend and her boyfriend are just like they're just hot and heavy making out during this thing. And I was like, all right, so like, I'm kind of interested in that. But I look over and all four of the parents are looking back at us while like these two are just like tongues down each other's throat or whatever. So like I need to be a little more like whatever. I need to be a little more surreptitious than that, right? But I don't know how to thread that needle at age 15 or whatever. So I'm sort of like awkwardly fumbling around in between like these two people that are just really making out and everyone's parents watching this whole thing go down. So that was not good either. But I guess the Wedding Singer was technically like my first date movie.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. The
Just
Titanic.
look over to see 8 eyes just like staring at you.
Oh, it was like so, and then obviously we all like drove back together right after all of this too, because none of the kids can drive. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that was not great. I would say it was more stressful than I would have liked. Especially, I'm 15. It's already like I'm as awkward as
Oh
I'm ever
yeah.
going to be, right? So, yeah. So those are the two. Those are the two.
That's great. What would you say is your favorite non-exercise thing that you have to force yourself to do?
Put on a French press. Like I drink a lot of coffee. You can do it the lazy
Uh,
way. There's something really gratifying about grinding the beans and boiling the water and sitting there and pushing down the thing. But I don't always
uh.
have like the like emotional wherewithal to do it. But it's so gratifying when it's done. It's harder for me. It is actually harder for me to do that than to exercise, even though I enjoy it more than exercising.
I wonder if it's because it feels so self-indulgent, or like exercising is you're like, I'm doing this for me and all the people that love me. Where it's like the French press, you're just like, it's it's not gonna be that much better,
That's that
but like,
that's for sure a big part of it, and it's also the out of doing it like easier, worse, like going down the
mhm.
street, whatever. Whereas exercising is like you're either doing it or you're not doing it.
Yeah, exactly. You can't like skip around your house and be like, well, I kind of exercised. You're like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have
yeah,
to do it or you can't. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Who's someone you've never met, alive or dead, that you'd like to have lunch with?
John Brown. He was a American around before the Civil War who led an armed slave rebellion against the United States. That is someone I would like to talk to. One, because everything about like their writing and what is known about them suggests they're at least a little bit unhinged, so it's at least interesting conversation. But also just the sense of purpose, the sense of like moral clarity, all that I find to
Hmm.
be extremely inspiring.
Did you watch The Good Lord Burr or Bird that came out recently that was kind of like about, I don't know about that exact circumstance you're talking about, but about John Brown?
I have not, but I would be interested. This is the first I'm hearing about it.
I think it's on, I want to say it's on HBO, but it looks like it might just be on Hulu. Yeah, it's starring like Ethan Hawke. I remember seeing a bunch of like insano like trailers for it. It looks very like they very much took a little bit of liberty, but definitely put a lot of money behind it. So yeah, I definitely would recommend checking that out. I remember hearing about John Brown the first time. Do you ever watch backslash listen to those Civil War documentaries done by crap?
Ken Burns.
Is it? Yeah, Burns.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've watched the entire set of that multiple times. I'm like definitely so I'm definitely like a Civil War fetishist or whatever you want to call it. I do know a lot
yeah.
about it, and actually, like this was an early moment with my moment with my wife where we're watching Jeopardy, and there's like one of the $1,000 or $2,000 questions. It's like it's a photo of General Hood, and the question is basically like,
Hmm.
who is this person? And I'm like, General Hood, get it right. And she's like, what is wrong with you? It's like we're not talking like it was like Lee or Grant or McClellan or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
pretty anonymous guy, all told.
yeah.
So I have watched the Ken Burns documentary. I do appreciate it as sort of like an Americana yarn meets history lesson.
Hmm.
There is something about Ken Burns's work that bothers me, which is like he always gets to the water's edge of assigning blame to someone or something, but can never go through with it. A lot of it seems to
Yeah.
be the ambiguity of morality and well, everyone was kind of doing the best with the information that they had, or like the other side had some points too, or whatever. Where to me, the foundation of the Civil War is like such a uh, just a monstrous and transparent evil that the attempts to sort of um, romanticize any element of the Southern perspective is off-putting to me now in a way that maybe it wasn't 7 or 8 years ago. Just kind of like my
Mm.
trajectory, but I do
Yeah.
appreciate it as a work of art. If you can turn your brain off to that sort of criticism, it is very well crafted for what it is.
Hmm.
But it is, I think, attempting. There's a feels like there's an intent of everyone walking away feeling good about what they just saw. And I think that's also
Yeah.
true to some degree of the Vietnam documentary too. Um, but I can still kind of enjoy it for what it is, but it doesn't mean as much to me as it did a while ago.
That's fair. I mean, like most things growing up, you realize there's more to the story and how like it kind of got painted. Like instead of using like a hard like acrylic oils or whatever, you used like watercolor to kind of keep it like light and bouncy when it's still like the demonstrative destruction of like a fair amount of the American structure as we know it.
I think I think that's often true, but this time I would say it's that, but the opposite. It is less complicated.
Hmm.
It is less complicated than Ken Burns is making
Oh
it
no, no,
sound.
I not talking about the complications, talking about like the weight at which you kind of that they're like drawing out the kind of severity and like making it so like kind of like basically taking a position
Right.
by like I think like the kind of vibe I get from I totally know what you're talking about and like see that point of like having this thing that is really a little bit more there is some amount of argument but by and large it's it's kind of a solved the puzzle's been solved. It turns out that the North was right and the South was wrong, and this shit was really fucked up. The way we went about it, no. But the way in which they kind of, they paint it, they really are trying to leave a little bit more. And I wonder maybe if it's that they want to leave it for like the audience to discover on their own. But I see what you mean by like not assigning blame and stuff like that.
To me, it's all again, not that like Ken Burns has this intent or this is like the starting point or whatever, but there
Mm-hmm.
is this like very American narration of our history of like it's an imperfect experiment, but the arc bends towards justice, right? Like things are getting better over time, even though that's um, we can reflect on things that we've done and can admit that they were wrong. And a gap in all
Mm-hmm.
of that storytelling to me is the discussion of Reconstruction, the period directly after the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
when actually like fairly radical politics were taking root in some parts of the country, and you know, uh, like southern states that were like just yesterday, slave states had like black senators and black House of Representative members and all that, and that stuff was clawed back over the course of about 10 years until we hit
Yeah.
Jim Crow. And Jim Crow is sort of described as this like it's often characterized as something of like a middle ground in between slavery and civil rights, like towards our arc of justice or whatever. When in reality, it
Yeah.
was like a reactionary win that pulled back gains that had been won
Yeah.
in the time after the Civil War. And I think a more honest unpacking of that sort of history might give some people a different perspective or lens about what's going on today, but that context is never really provided.
Yeah. This is a. I love how this ended up going a completely different way. The reason I brought up the Ken Burns documentary is because that's like the first place I heard of your boy John Brown.
Yeah.
Is like I think he has an excerpt talking about like I think it's in the first or second episode of the Civil War documentary where he and his sons went to some slave owner's house with broadswords in the middle of like the 1860s
Yeah.
and just started lopping heads. And I was just like, this guy's awesome. All right. And like they made a movie about him and you talked to him. It reminded me of that. It's like, wanted to bring that around for some reason. Anyway. Yeah, that's yeah. The Jim Crow is definitely a little bit more towards one end than the other
Right.
in regards to like slavery and civil rights, to be sure. Speaking of things that are awful in another word, what's your favorite non-traditional curse word or phrase? If you need an example of what I mean, I can give you one.
Yeah, hit me.
So like mother trucker or son of a motherless goat, either a kind of a PG setting for a curse word for like a television, or if you're wanting to get more inventive and not piss off the Puritans, kind of.
I use Great Caesar's Ghost a lot. I think that's probably my go-to. Most of my like personal and professional life I can kind of more or less curse freely. It's really only with
Yeah.
the SEGs where there was any sort of having to calibrate that a little bit. Um, but yeah, that's my go-to, I think, in day-to-day settings, maybe around the kids or when I'm trying to be like ironic for effect.
It's got a great ring to it. Do you ever see the film Anchorman, like the first one?
Yes.
That it reminds me of that intro where he's just like doing all those like voice warm ups, just like Odin's Raven, and just like all of those like quasi moments of but not like very like like network certified.
Yeah, I like when he's doing his like enunciation drills. He's doing like
Yeah,
the skeleton shampoo in the shower or whatever, but like really
yeah,
announcing the sh. Yeah, that
yeah.
it's like not. It's one of those things where it's like it's very hard for me to watch the movie from beginning to end, but it does have like
Mm.
some pretty fun discrete moments the first
Oh
viewing or whatever.
yeah, no, it's very quotable. It has moments that definitely drop off on like viewing like 3 through X, but like on the first couple, it really was a tremendous tour de force.
Yeah.
What inanimate object would you like to be best friends with were it sentient?
Basketball. Because it's really fun to play with, and then also were it sentient, you would find out if like does the basketball actually enjoy this, or is it just like does it just suck?
What would you do as somebody who has played countless hundreds of hours of basketball? What would you do if you found out basketball's like all on what was that weird food movie? Screw it, I can't remember. But like, what would you do if you found out basketballs hated this was like causing them great distress?
Uh,
Would you still play basketball?
I no, I would not. I would do whatever whatever the equivalent is of showing up to someone's house with broadswords to get it to stop. Um, but yeah, yeah,
Patrick Sullivan takes on the NBA. Swing.
yeah, but yeah, definitely basketball. Yeah, there's something about the rhythm to it, the sound. It's just like very, very pleasing.
Do you have a life hack you'd like to share with the class that would
Um,
improve their overall existence?
well, there's a lot of different like paths to that. Um, I I guess I don't know if I would call this a life hack exactly because that implies a certain like here's a trick or whatever. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
no, actually, I do have a life hack that I would offer up that is a life hack, which is peeling bananas from the bottom. That's just way better than peeling it
Oh
from the
yeah,
top. That's
yeah.
solved. I've discovered this with children. Um, I guess it is sort of a more like I don't know if I would call this a life hack necessarily, but my life definitely got better when uh, starting to view things through this lens of like it's really like attracted to have this binary with a lot of your like friends or people in your personal life of like we're either really really tight and we're kind of like immersed in everything together, or I have to just like freeze them out. And I've learned the value over time of being able to compartmentalize people like they're good uh, to hang out or be around or talk to in certain spaces and not others. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a fine place to stop toggling between zeros and hundreds and let people rest in
Yeah,
your life somewhere in the middle.
yeah. And it's not even like numerical, right? It's like it becomes like okay, this person, like you could almost like color sort your like friends list of like, these are the friends that I play basketball with. They're, all in like the red column. These are the friends that I play Magic with. They're in the green column, so on and so forth. And then like have them like mix the cross, right? Like where there's some that like bleed from like one category to the next, but to not like, even though you don't play like let's say for instance, although I'm sure you do, like let's say you don't play basketball that frequently, you can still have your, the people you talk to and like be, effectively basketball friends, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think, I mean, in Magic specifically, I think learning that sort of thing was really important because you've got like the community does select in the tournament sense for like charismatic grifters, and it is important to
Mm-hmm.
be able to separate like people who are uh, good to have dinner with people who are good to do business with. It's not the same thing,
They're not always the same for
right? It's
sure.
not a one for one.
Yeah. And like also on the flip side, I think this is like the one that's hardest, especially for like spiky players, uh, is having friends that are good for dinner but not good for playtesting.
Yeah,
And like not, discounting them just because like they're not good. Like you don't need to have only friends that are like top tier Magic players. You can have friends that are like casual or, very mediocre. Like that doesn't mean they're like less of a person or a good influence in your life, even though they're not going to necessarily add for like the competitive Magic sense. Like even if they're just like a cool hang and like Magic is like barely something you talk about, it's still, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think I
Shouldn't
definitely
be a,
I viewed a lot of my interactions through that lens when I was like, 20 or 21, about just like
same.
wanting to socialize with good Magic players and like that being the measuring stick for how much charity I would offer someone or how like would I go out of my way to help them out or anything like that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
where that comes from is, you know, in some ways you're trying to validate yourself. Like you are applying so much energy into trying to get good at this craft that if it
Mm-hmm.
is just one thing among many or like who cares or whatever, it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
invalidating your own work. And I think um my sort of viewing social interactions or friendships through that lens was like ultimately because I was insecure because I was only doing this one thing, and people who had like more complete lives or were more well-rounded or happier or whatever, there was a thing that I could point to say like, oh well, they're just not good at Magic, and like that's like a way of protecting yourself from having
Yeah.
to take account for where your life's at and what you're doing.
Yeah. And also, I mean, like, sadly, this is kind of, I found this to be part of it. I don't know about you, but like how other people who, it kind of like is incestuous, this problem, because other people that are like, that you either look up to that are also on the rise, they look at you as lesser. At least they did back, when I think we like kind of played, I think you played a bit before I did, but around that same time frame of you get looked at like, why are you hanging out with that guy? Almost like, kind of like hanging out with an uncool kid in high school. There was this like pariah-ish nature to it where you just get kind of excluded for hanging out with, Tweedledum, even though he's like a really nice, sweet guy.
Definitely. And on the flip side of that, there are a couple of pros who were um very kind to me when I was first kind of coming up, like going to my first Hubble Grand Prix or whatever. And I was honestly
Mm-hmm.
like, I was shocked when that happened because I was like, just assumed that they were going to be viewing everything through the same lens that I was. So that was a really sweet moment for me, like personally, obviously, like having some of these people be very kind to me. But it was also kind of the first bit of illumination of like, well, if Brian Kibler is being really nice to me and he doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, why am I going to my local store and being an
Yeah,
asshole, So it was I'm glad that I had that experience both because it was a good feeling at the time and also because it started laying the foundation for behaving a little bit better in that space.
totally. All right. Well, to go from the sincere to the surreal, if you were a condiment, which do you think you'd be?
Mustard. Um
Just yellow mustard, or are we getting some spice in there?
a little bit of spice. Not for everyone, but enriches the experience for a select few. I would go with mustard.
Love it. Growing up, what did you want to be?
Like my my first idea or sort of like the entire arc?
You can definitely list the first idea, but I'd love to hear the arc of like where P Sully wanted to go,
All right.
wanted to be.
First job that I ever thought that I really wanted to have when I was like, I think 7 years old. Catholic priest. Kid you not. That was yeah. No, well, I was raised in the church, and like I was into it, right? Like I was an altar server,
Mm,
not because my parents maybe, but because I was like I wanted to be involved in the church. Like I did 6:30 mass
love it.
on Sunday mornings when I was a kid. My mom would take me over there, and well, I think my perspective at the time was like, so if you really believe that this is true, like
Hmm.
there's a God and there's like consequences for all your actions, and like the Son of God was on Earth for a period of time and like told people a bunch of cool stuff, right? Like if you think all that is
Yeah.
true, it didn't make sense to me that you wouldn't devote your life to it. Like the people who
Yeah.
came when I was a kid and doing the church service, the people who came in like once a month with their kids or whatever, I was like, that's really weird. Like, do you believe this or not? Um,
Yeah.
so eventually, like, had my falling out or whatever, early teenage years, then I pivoted to like I think lawyer to politician to by the time I graduated high school and was going to college, I had this like vague sense. I wouldn't even be able to tell you what this meant. It was like I want to
Hmm.
work for an NGO. I don't even know what that really means, but I knew that there was something like viscerally off-putting about like politics as such, but there was some
Hmm.
way of like working in like law and government and coordination that like was very appealing to me. So that was my arc as a child to very, very young adult.
Where which job are you the most glad you didn't like, kind of go harder for or end up getting?
Oh, the last one, like the NGO work. So my 1 year of college, I went to Seton Hall University in North Jersey. Um, and I was a diplomacy and international relations student. They had a major there that was like kind of specialized, and Seton Hall up in North Jersey is pretty close to the UN building, so like you got to go in there and like look at stuff. I don't know, whatever. It seemed cool,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I was sort of becoming disillusioned with the whole thing. I think part was like broadly my mental health was not in very good shape, but also um, I was starting to see behind the curtain a little bit more. And I
Hmm.
was talking to a professor about this, and he's like, "Yeah, you got to get over it. Uh, it's not about like actually doing the most good. It's about your side winning. Ideally, you can
Oh
actually,
no.
it's like ideally that does come with positive change or like positive influence for some people, but
Yeah.
you can't start with that being the number one priority." And he said it so matter of factly, like breezily. It wasn't like
Yeah.
he wasn't like grabbing me by the shoulders and like it was just like yeah. He for him it was like it was so obvious that it was like barely noteworthy, and that was like the
Yeah.
last piece of the puzzle for me to be like, all right, I'm not going to do this, and like I got to drop out of school and all
Yeah.
that. Um, but I think I would have been the combination of I would have been miserable, and also I would have been very good at it. Is why I'm glad that I did not
Yeah.
end up going down that path.
Yeah. It's like finding out you have a talent for thievery. It's just like this does not lead to good things.
It's a dangerous. I mean, I get into sort of Twitter like sideways arguments with people about this stuff all the time. Of like, is debate a skill for elucidating truth? And it's like, maybe I don't know. I'm really good at debate. I'm sure that if you if you hypothetical person on Twitter took the position that I hold and I took the opposite position that I didn't believe in and we debated that I would wail on you. So it suggests that debating is like a skill like
Yeah.
anything else and not this like font for revealing truth. And
Hmm.
having the skill or the aptitude or experience to do that while at the same time thinking that it's just a total grift is a weird
Yeah.
thing that I struggle with all the time, but at least it's like I'm at least somewhat honest with myself about the whole thing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a scary kind of slope to look at, to be sure.
It's like, oh, I could really easily do evil things. It's a pretty dangerous thing to realize about yourself, but also there's something about not fetishizing your own natural aptitude as being like somehow sacred or valuable. You can be good at scummy things and just not do
Yeah.
them, or not do them in the scummy way, and that's
Hmm.
fine, I guess.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like, being a police officer in a way. It's like you have this opportunity to do so much good, but also you have a lot of unchecked power. So it's like this dangerous, like, yeah, obviously, like, it can be used for good, but a lot of people use it for bad. Should you be surprised? Probably not.
Well, as
Like,
particularly in spots where there's a selection bias for who does it, like
yeah.
who if police officers were randomly distributed among, like, if people got randomly assigned jobs and just like how
Hmm.
whatever percent of people ended up being police officers, I think it would be very, very different than you
Totally.
just, it's a job you apply for. Like, why would you apply for that job? I don't know. I like yelling at people. I like having a gun. I like not being ever accountable for anything that I do. um you know
Yeah,
uh
being in a brotherhood that will protect me carte blanche.
right, yeah, it doesn't
Like,
matter. It doesn't matter what I do, as long as I don't rat on anyone else. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, it
It sounds like you're describing a gang. No, this is completely legal. Wait, what?
yeah, it's like a paramilitary mafia organization. um right, so you had
What's
to,
wrong about that? How could that possibly do bad things to our
so
society?
you have to factor in sort of the selection bias of who would choose to go down this road in the first place.
Yeah. Backtracking to a little bit more of a quaint and sweet truth, you were talking about how you wanted to be a priest. Talking to my father recently, um, it came to light talking like around Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, that he is now a pastor, and growing up at the age of 6 or 8 or something like that, he, I believe he wrote down or got a transcript of the pastor's sermon from the previous week and made his family sit down, and so he could pretend to be pastor and read out the whole
Oh
entire
my god.
sermon to them while they sat around the living room. So like I totally know what you mean. It's funny, but at the same time it's like, no, that's like, there are people that are actually like that. And it's like, as hokey as that sounds, it is so beautiful to like aspire to something like that and like follow it and have it not only be like it's cool that people want to be superheroes, they want to be astronauts, they want to do the flashy things, but it's so beautiful and pure and serene, to me at least, when people like, I want to be the milkman, I want to be the pastor, I want to be, and they find something that doesn't have that pizzazz to it and they like want to go after it anyway. Obviously you could argue that depending upon the way you look at religion, that being a priest, being a pastor does have a lot of pizzazz, because you are like one of the funnels to heaven in a way.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of powerful and kind of cool. But I guess it depends how you look at it. But it's so beautiful to hear other people having wanted to do that, not necessarily being drawn into the practice, but still going after something that is very much off the beaten path, and kind of making their own, drumming their own song.
And in my time in the church, like, I encountered priests who engage with it in both ways. There's the like, this is sort of an abstract intellectual exercise, and I know the rules, or can at least teach them to you, and I'm your sort of
Uh-huh.
vessel towards like salvation, essentially. And then
Uh-huh.
there's the other end of the spectrum, which is like, uh, you like live and breathe and engage with the world, and the world was created by
Yeah.
God. And so what actually matters is like your practical day-to-day impact on the world and the people around you. And the second thing is like, I'm not religious at this point, but the second thing I think is a really like powerful and useful lens to look through the world. And for people with radical politics, they often would describe essentially that, just minus the whole God and religion aspect. I think the
Uh-huh.
first sort of camp is a selection for wanting to be a star. Like, to me, that's the same as wanting to be an astronaut or a or an NBA player,
Yeah.
right? Like, you want the eyes on you, you want to be the star
Yeah.
of the show. But not everyone I encountered in the church had that sort of perspective.
Yeah, it's really beautiful when you see the kind of second, which luckily enough I think I grew up with. is the way I would very much describe it. So very fortunate. Do you ever, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, do you ever see the show Fleabag?
I don't believe I have.
Okay. There's a really good example of the way I'm interpreting what you're saying in the second season, where they have this guy who's a priest and cares about his people, isn't, doesn't concern himself with it being on him, but loves like the knick-knackery of being a priest. There's this great, adorable scene they wrote in the second season where he shows off this frock that he got that is really kind of, it's got a little bit of glitz to it, and he's just jazzed about it. And not in this like, I'm gonna look cool, but isn't this awesome? And he's just like, he's so nerdy about being a priest and about loving God. And like, even as somebody who I would consider myself more agnostic at this point than Christian, but looking at that, it's something that just, I don't know, it's so beautiful to see that in the world when somebody can be passionate about something in a way that is not harmful to others and in no way is kind of like tainted. It's just like pure, unadulterated, childlike, just excitement and capture.
Right.
It's like, it's so beautiful. I love seeing that.
Yeah, there's a level of kind of continuity to it, of the, you remember being like seeing other people do this. Like I remember, I can't remember what the name of it is, but like, Catholic priests, they wear kind of something, or a sash sort of like around their shoulders and down, and the colors are different depending, like if it's Easter or Lent or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, I had one priest in particular who was like, thought it was just really cool, would talk to me about this stuff. And there was a certain level of like, all right, when he was a kid, someone probably told him about it. Now he's a priest, he's talking to me. And maybe some other, 40 years down the line, I'm talking to some kid about it. And now, you know what I mean? Like that stewardship of, like,
Yeah.
this is my, I don't own this thing. I'm a shepherd of it for a short period of time. And like, I absorb the stuff that I learned and then pass it forward. And hopefully that gets passed forward. There is something really fundamentally sweet about that to me, even if, I'm certainly not religious anymore or have any sort of attachment to the Catholic Church.
Yeah. I think what we're talking about is a stole
Stole? That sounds
or
possible.
a fascia. I don't know. It's like it's really cool. But going back to the more important thing of, it is so beautiful. Like that idea of like passing down that kind of wonderment and that joy, and like not doing it with an agenda. I think is the best part of that to me is just like, I like this thing so much. I think it's so cool. I think it's so neat, and not having, so much of the time when people, even I find myself when talking about, a band or magic or something that I'm passionate about, it's almost like trying to convert. It's like, you should like this too. And like the purest forms of this are, I like this so much. Can I tell you about it? It's not like I need you to do this thing. You need you to, you don't need to drink any Kool-Aid. You don't need to come with me and do this thing. I just want to talk about how cool this is.
Totally. The issue where that sort of thing breaks down with Catholicism is, if you believe it, you think the other person who
Other people
doesn't
should
believe it
Yeah.
are going to be damned to an eternity of torture.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
it's not as like, oh, I like magic, and if you don't like
Yeah.
magic, that's cool. Go do something else. It's
Yeah.
not,
No.
it has a different sort of tone to
Yeah. For sure.
it.
The kind of the awkward thing, I've thought about this a lot. I totally understand both sides of the whole like religion thing when it comes to, like how one side's annoyed, I don't believe in it. I don't need to hear about it. I'm glad you enjoy your thing. Can you leave me the fuck alone? But at the same time, it's so understandable. And like, I don't know who I'm trying to like say is right, but I don't think it's anybody, but the idea that like it makes sense why somebody who, if you believe in any religion, whether it's, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, whatever, it makes sense that you want to convert people because you think it's like if you found the best flavor of chocolate and people were just still eating like a Crunch Bar, you're like, dude, they're like, I enjoy this Crunch Bar. You're like, this is amazing. Like, this changed my life. I can't, like, this chocolate bar is the best chocolate bar on the planet Earth. You need to have some, or at least try it. And people like saying like, nah, I'm good, I've got my Crunch Bar. Like, how is somebody who found the world's best chocolate, like, how do you accept that? But in the same time, if you enjoy a Crunch Bar, you don't really like the look or smell of that particular type of chocolate. Of course, you don't want to have it. And of course, it's annoying when somebody keeps trying to make you have the chocolate. It's like such a weird both sides. Like there's validity to an extent to both sides, but yeah, it is. It is definitely not like the same thing as liking Magic or a band or something like that. But
For me, it's sort of like, um, so if you're um, Catholic, let's say, um,
mm-hmm.
and you believe that um, during Mass, the water and the wafers are literally transformed into the blood and body of Christ, and then you no longer are Catholic, you probably stop believing that. But
Mm-hmm.
you also probably don't go around killing people, in spite of the fact, that thou shalt not kill is in the Ten Commandments. So that
Sure.
suggests to me that some of what religion is doing, or like basically there is some morality that is like somehow underpinning all of humanity, and there are some of it that is like cultural and ritual and practice, like the difference between believing the body of Christ and not killing people, even though you no longer believe the Ten Commandments came down from heaven. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where that I think your point is very reasonable. How do you not pass this on? But like I think there's a burden to separate. Are you living as a good and moral, decent person, which all sorts of people
Mm-hmm.
do from all perspectives, and separating that from like, do you believe in the ritual and the tradition and like the things that are being expressed as fact in whatever the text is.
Mm-hmm. Well, stepping away from this religious soiree to one of a little bit more of a human realm. Let's say you're going out to a party and you want to look extra. Other than the normal garb, what accessory would you rock?
A watch. That's
Do
how.
you have a preference on type or brand, or
I don't
is it
know.
just whatever is like kind of in your
I
sock drawer?
I have a couple. I Back when I first got like my first decent job and then like kind of a decent raise many years ago, I went down to the mall in San Diego and bought a Burberry watch, which I still have as like a reminder of like don't do stupid shit with your money because it's there. But like it is nice, and I do break that out from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a couple other less ostentatious offerings that depending on the circumstances. But yeah, a watch is like so like impractical at this point. I shouldn't say that. There
Yeah,
there are actually times where I'm like I'm in a situation where I will need to know the time, but it will be rude to be looking at my phone. And then it's like kind of
sure.
useful, but in a day-to-day sense, like why on earth would anyone need this anymore? So
Yeah,
that's my extra little bit of flair, I guess.
nice. You can always do the kind of bust out too of somebody asks the time. You can kind of like make sure to give it like a little bit of that wrist flourish so that people see you got
Oh yeah,
the shiny going
oh
on.
yeah, it's loud too. So just yeah, that little shake, and then exactly, you got it. You know what time it is, as it were.
Nice. That, I wish that was the intent of that that
Yeah,
setup. That would make me feel a lot smarter.
no, that's organic. That's organic.
It's just pure goodness right there. What life lesson do you wish you learned sooner in life?
Um, that both personally and professionally and all that, like the times where you're like, okay, was I a little too kind? Was I a little too accommodating? Versus was I a little bit too mean? Was I a little bit too self-centered? Was I a little bit too whatever? Like you're gonna regret the second camp so much more than the first camp. Um,
Yeah,
and I guess I wish I was oriented more towards giving people the benefit of the doubt, giving people with different outlooks or ways of doing things more charity or respect, like all that constellation of stuff. Um, and again, a lot of it ties back to magic, right? Like my life kind of bottomed out when I was 19, and there was this thing that I was good at, and there's this thing that I could apply
Hmm.
my energy to. And it was not only was it validation, but it was a way of like boxing myself in a little bit. Like you don't have to focus on how um, bad or mismanaged or sad the rest of your life is when you can just put your head down at this pursuit. Um,
Hmm.
and a lot of it, I think, is in that like unkindness, lack of charity spaces. Again, it was like it was self defense, it was insecurity, it was not um,
Totally.
a function of like it actually being a judgment on people. It's a judgment on myself. But again, I didn't know that until I knew it.
Yeah. Definitely is. It is one of those things that if you don't, you get so much by talking to people that either are therapists, psychiatrists, whatever, or just people that are quite wise. It's one of those things that you wouldn't think to know that you were. It's not like a slot you see and like a character build. Like if you're looking at your character as if you're playing like some roguelite, that you could see that like, that spot was open, that you could put that gemstone, that, quill in there so that your character would have that. You just like, it's so hard to see that you're missing that when you're living life on the day to day. And there's so many things like, it's not like it's such a like intangible thing that it's hard to see that other people are doing that even.
So this is the first time in my life where I've been going to therapy slash counseling for sort of like both an extended period of time and regularly. And there's been a lot of
Mm-hmm.
good that has come out of it. But the top of it is the transformation from being mad to feeling that I'm mad. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
the step can you step outside yourself for a minute, and instead of just my emotions are what they are, and I'm gonna just indulge that however I see fit, going from that
Mm-hmm.
to I can tell that something's off with me right now. Check in with yourself. Are you actually
Mm-hmm.
mad because this is a thing to be mad about? Or is there something else going on? Or even if you are like quote unquote legitimately mad about it, can you just take a second, come back to it in an hour and see if it's still pissing you off? And if it is, maybe then you have the conversation about it, but just like give yourself that space to cool off. Like being
Yeah.
being less reactionary and more
Mm-hmm.
aware has probably been the most useful thing that's come out of it for me, like in a day to day sense.
Yeah, no, it's something that I too learned about relatively recently. There's this great bit. It sounds like you're exactly mirroring a conversation. I'll see if I can find and put it in like the show notes. It's a conversation between Dan Harmon and Pete Holmes on Dan Harmon's podcast Harmontown, where he talks about like the idea of awareness of like the way it gets talked about is just insanely hilarious to me. But the idea that we are like we've there's us and then we have these dangly bits,
Mhm.
and that if we like really think about it, we can remove ourselves from our body and we can just kind of look at our body from like our mind's perspective and be like, huh, that's weird. I feel this. Why am I angry? I feel anxious. Why am I anxious? And ask yourself these questions and look and like kind of like dissect the circumstance, the feeling, and figure out like the root cause of it and how to address it. Not that like it needs to be removed, but kind of, oh, I'm anxious because I don't know where my next paycheck is coming from. I'm angry because this person isn't doing me back the solid that I did to them or I did for them. Like I helped them move and now I'm like, hey, could you, pick me up at the airport? And they're like, nah, I'd rather, watch a movie. And like, so like unpacking that, looking down and seeing ourselves for our circumstance as opposed to just being mad or being annoyed and not seeing like where that's coming from, why that's coming from, and if it's, invalid, or if in fact, you're right to feel that way, but maybe not express it in the way that you're initially like wanting to.
Yeah. No, it's your mind and your body has all these ways of signaling to you that um the way that you're feeling is just self-evidently true. It's so easy to
Mm-hmm.
just indulge that instinct. And especially for me, like there's just a background of just, shit that's happened or whatever that gets you to that certain point.
Yeah.
And being able to have the awareness of your own responses and how you're feeling and like things that, you're biased towards in one direction or the other. And it's helpful in both directions too, because there's also the like, I'm aware, uh, but also when I am upset about something and I'm marinating on it for a long time and taking my time with it and I'm still upset, I have more confidence that it's like, oh, I'm actually upset about this thing. And it's not just a
Hmm.
reaction to something else. You're not just,
Yeah.
in the weeds, just sort of flailing around. Like you have a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
more confidence when you do have an issue to be like, no, this is just what it is or whatever.
Yeah. It allows you, as opposed to playing like the first person shooter that we all thought this life was, it allows us to play like a top down, third person perspective game and see the obstacles around us, see what we're ensnared by that looking straight forward we can't see.
Right. Exactly.
What is your favorite poor man luxury that you still enjoy to this day?
7-Eleven coffee. I go, uh I don't want to lay out my circumstance exactly, but I no longer need to go to 7-Eleven to get coffee, but I still sometimes go to 7-Eleven to get coffee. Enough that my wife is like, why are you doing that? Like we have coffee here, and it's like that. I never want to feel like too big for my britches or whatever. And there is something like
Yeah.
I do like a good cup of coffee. Like I do
Hmm.
indulge that kind of stuff. But the like powerfully artificial and scalding hot 7-Eleven or like Dunkin' Donuts style coffee is like
Yeah.
there's a lot of powerful nostalgia there for me still.
One of my roommates or ex-roommates now, Eric Partita, who was on the first season, when living with him, is really funny. We would occasionally, he would want to go to, he would order and buy these really expensive, good cups of coffee, had like, all the accoutrement to make like a good cup of coffee in our apartment. And, at one time had that coffee that, cats have to shit out and is like super expensive and fucking
Right.
all kinds of weird. But at the same time, he would love to go to McDonald's. He's like, hey, I'm going to McDonald's to pick up coffee. Do you want anything? It's like, sorry, what? It's like, you getting a burger? He's like, no, I just want a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And he would go there to get a cup of coffee. I was like, why don't you go like someplace better? He's like, look, it's either got to be really good or really shitty. It's like, there's a value in that really shitty, like dollar cup of coffee.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
like, fit.
so for me, dead last, like the place I will not go to just get coffee is Starbucks. I'm not
Yeah.
paying $3 for that shit. No chance. I'll pay a dollar. I'll pay a dollar at 7-Eleven. I'll pay $7 over at Amethyst down the street. I'm fine with either of those. I'm not paying $3 at Starbucks. That'll never be me.
Yeah. I don't mind Starbucks. I'm not a fan of it. I don't reach out for it. I make mine at home or, go get some nice cup of coffee. The thing that offends me about Starbucks more than the fact that they overcharge is the fact that they don't tell you that they're putting sugar in your coffee.
Oh,
I
whoops.
used to think I liked black coffee when I would go get black coffee from them, but then I found out later it wasn't straight black coffee. There's like 4 pumps of syrup that they just put in, like, unless you ask them not to.
Well, I don't mind all of their stuff, but I think their drip coffee just tastes like a 170-degree ashtray. Like it's just not drinkable. It's worse.
Uh,
It's worse than 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts and more expensive, and the sort of ambiance of the whole thing is more obnoxious and
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, it's people sticking their nose in the air as if that like they're on a skyscraper when they're actually in like the like they're on the second floor of like the Sears Tower or something like that. It's like
yeah.
you're not above people having McDonald's coffee by that much. Maybe like tone it down a
Yeah,
little bit.
you're in hell too. You're in hell
Yeah.
too, but the
Yeah.
person who's at McDonald's is more aware of it than you are. So you're actually in a worse.
And they're paying less for it.
Exactly. Right.
Like they're saving money. They don't have this like, aloofness or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah. What's the next book, graphic novel, TV show, or movie you've been putting off that is next on your to consume list?
Okay, so I got two on my bookshelf, literally right now. I'm staring at that are next on the list. One is a refresher of Marx's Capital, which I have read in the past twice, but there's a lot
Is
to
it literally called a refresher on Marxist Capital?
no, it's a copy of Capital by Marx.
Oh, okay.
That's like I've aspired to read it once every 10 years. And I think it's a good thing to sort of, because a lot of what the book speaks to is sort of the arc of history. So I think it is actually kind of fascinating to go back and look and read.
Hmm.
And I've just been putting it off. And the other new one is from Staircase to Stage, which is Raekwon's book, I think, about sort of the early days of the Wu-Tang Clan, which, again, very much want to read, but it's been put off for a while.
That's awesome. All right. Lastly, before we throw it to commercial break, if you could have listeners of this podcast hear one song of your choosing, which would it be?
AFK by Pinback. Um, they're my favorite band. Um, it's actually kind of weird because I believe the song plays better within the context of the entire album rather than as a
Mm-hmm.
discrete piece. But I think so. It would be on my short list of songs um, that like would be my walkout song or whatever if it was like a pro
Mm-hmm.
wrestler or um, if Magic events ever had something like that without it
Mm-hmm.
coming from a band or an album that ever would suggest that something like that was there and not being in that sort of like stadium anthem kind of space. So I think the song is like really fun and cool. It's from my favorite band, and there's a lot of nuance there, I think, both individually in the context of the album that I would give it a listen. And if it's for you, I would go check out more Pinback stuff.
Totally. It could not. This is another one that the minute when for the people that want to see behind the curtain, the I ask a lot of these questions beforehand, and the minute he said this, he goes, "I don't know if it's on Spotify." It's like, oh, I'm very sure it's on Spotify.
Yep. Yep.
Well, with that, we're going to throw it to our first break. Feel free to stick around and enjoy this totally real commercial, or take a minute to enjoy AFK by Pinback. Or if you really wanted to hear a song from a previous episode, check out the playlist on Spotify, Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Song Rex. It's a long title, I know. Don't worry, there's a link in the description. Either way, see you in a jiffy. Do you need 100 pounds of butter? Come on down to Company Street Company.
What if I need 30 gallons of olive oil?
Come on down to Company Street Company. But what if I just want one flatless bird roasted for a reasonable price? Come on down to Company Street Company.
Okay, but
Just come on down to Company Street Company. We have everything for a better price, free snacks, and employees who don't want to kill themselves, or you because we treat them like fucking human beings. Yeah, but yup.
even
Just get your ass down to Company Street Company, where the only sketchy thing we've ever done is enable frozen orange juice hoarders. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm here with P. Sully. P. Sully, what is the passion that you've brought with you today to talk about?
So it's kind of a constellation of stuff.
Ooh, like the stars?
Yeah, something like that. So I've always been interested in like sports and pro sports. I would call myself a fan. I've also
Mm-hmm.
been involved, like obviously in Magic in various ways. I'm a game designer by trade. I've been involved in other hobbies like comic books and sports cards, whatever. There's just a lot of stuff in that
Mm-hmm.
space. And both because I think it's just good professionally, but also because I'm fascinated by it. Actually, studying um, the similarities and differences and the things that like draw out the differences between those sort of endeavors or mediums, and trying to find places where I can learn by the way that another industry does things is sort of a pet project of mine. It's not something where I'm like actively trying to spend n hours a day doing the thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm much more interested in learning about adjacent industries as it informs my day to day work than I was 10 years ago.
What are some good examples so that people can kind of get sink their teeth into this a little bit
Sure.
more?
Okay. So Magic, for example, there's been
Hmm.
a lot made lately about various boutique products and special um, extended arts and low print run foils and you know booster packs and secret layers that are like $40 for 5 cards, whatever. All that stuff's kind of
Hmm.
been talked about now for years. So I am part of an unboxing group on Facebook. Are you familiar with what that means?
Unboxing meaning you just generally when I hear unboxing, I think of somebody recording them opening a, kind of product and just doing it for others to kind of experience it through like that person doing it.
So
Is that
so
about right?
that is true for like magic cards, and that sort of thing happens all the time. It's a little bit different in the sports card industry, because people are typically fans of teams or players or whatever. Um,
Okay.
it's not like in Magic where you open a pack and for the most part, like if a card's useful, great. Like in sports cards, there's sort of disproportionate value in Giants fans getting Giants cards and Cowboys fans getting Cowboys cards and all the way down. So the way that
Sure.
these groups work is that you basically buy a slot. Um, Sometimes the teams are randomly assigned. Sometimes you can pick your team or whatever, and then they open up
Hmm.
the packs or the box. And then if you have the Cowboys, then any Cowboys in the box gets sent to you. And same with the Packers, and same with the whatever, all the way down the line. So it's
Sure.
fascinating to me, because the changes to Magic as it pertains to just like the secret layer, low print run, sealed product being super expensive, like that whole list of things is it's got nothing on sports cards. You have no idea. It's like I'm not kidding. You can go to Panini's website. It's like every month there's a new pack that's $800 that has 5 cards in it,
Holy
that
shit.
has 5 cards in it, and most of it is trash. And there's just like 2 or 3 like super valuable lottery tickets in the whole print run, and everything else is just not worth very much. And these box breaks just fill and they go. Which is not to say that I think that Magic should replicate that model or that the games that I'm working on should replicate that model, but that
Hmm.
it's like orders of magnitude crazier than what goes on with Magic. And there is something to that. So trying to find like um, what are the differences in the culture, in the economy, in the distribution methods, in the frequency that products are released. And I'm not saying like I'm going to draw this like eureka moment out of it, but
Hmm.
it's just another thing to look at. Like I think people can often
Yeah.
get into this mindset of like the only way to learn about the thing that I work on is to learn about the thing that I work on. And usually
Hmm.
you can pull out some parallels and other stuff. So I've been trying to do more of that lately.
That's so cool. So, like, to backtrack now, I'm kind of fascinated with this whole idea of like unboxing for baseball. So, am I correct in assuming that everybody buys, to be in part of the unboxing, you pay X, where 800 is divided by X per, person entered, and you get to like assign which team you want,
Um,
and then any cards for that team you get, or how does that quite work?
so it's different breaks do it different ways. One is
Hmm.
you get random teams assigned, because like some teams are more valuable than others. So
Sure.
if you just let everyone pick, the most valuable teams would get picked first, and then you wouldn't be able to fill out the break because all that's left at the end is trash. So the two ways of solving that problem are just one, fully random. You buy a slot and then they draw teams and then you're in. And the other is pricing each team weighted by like the expected value, and then people can buy the team, but they're paying different amounts for different teams.
Hmm.
So, like in NFL, for example, most of the value of cards in a print run is nested in the rookie quarterbacks. So this past year,
Hmm.
Jacksonville, San Francisco, Jets, and Patriots were like very expensive in the box breaks, and other teams were much cheaper by comparison. Bears too, I guess.
Hmm. So, what do you kind of, what if any have like info have you gleaned from this, or do you believe kind of proliferates through into like other like hobbies, card collecting, or even other pastimes that you kind of see this as like a through line or like a good mirror?
The amount of so a lot of it has to do with how are you able to satisfy your big spending customers without alienating or discouraging people who are spending less money. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so, like, yeah, in Magic, obviously you can put out like a bunch of these Modern Horizons products or whatever, but like you are driving up the cost of the format, and for less invested players, that's going to be really frustrating, maybe an exit point. The stuff they did in Kamigawa, were like I forget the cards exactly, but they made like some special treatments with different colors and such, and they were
Mm-hmm.
super rare. That to me is a really good way of doing it, and it's also really analogous to sports cards. Something that's very common is like, okay, this card, it's green, and it's there's 99 in existence, and the card says /99 on it. And then there's an orange one, and it's one of and there's 50. And then there's a purple one,
Mm-hmm.
and there's 10. And then there's a pink one, and there's 5. And it's like that sort of thing, like who cares, right? If someone wants to
Yeah.
spend 5 times the money to get one of the super rare pink ones, who like okay, that doesn't matter at all. Let that person do that if they
Mm-hmm.
want to do it. And Magic, the stuff that happened in Kamigawa is pretty analogous to that. It's just like super rare, slightly different colored stuff. So I don't know if they got someone over there that's like paying attention to the sports card industry necessarily, but it is interesting to me that Magic has started to pick up some of those tricks that until recently have basically just been the purview of sports cards.
Totally. That's really cool. When did you start to get interested and like really start noticing and paying attention to these kind of amazing and interesting through lines?
Um, I work for Direwolf Digital in Denver, and I was let go in Thanksgiving of 2019. And so I had to work really, I started drumming up contracting work, and I worked for some of my clients included Scopely and EA, which are primarily mobile studios, or at least I was working on mobile projects. And I was coming in
Mm-hmm.
without a whole lot of mobile fluency. And it was really fascinating to me, like what was the same and different? What were things that they took as true that the places I worked for previously did not necessarily take as true? What were the things that I could do that seemed very easy to me that they were just like blown away by, and vice versa? So some of it was
Mm-hmm.
motivated out of a sense of like, I need to pick up a more generalized skill set just for my own employment prospects. Like, yeah, I could be really good at TCG design and development and balance or whatever, but like, there's only so many seats at the table. But if I can
Mm-hmm.
ratchet up my skill set to be able to work for mobile studios, now there's this whole space open to me, this much wider opportunity. And so I
So
started
this was your like this was your like red pill moment
something
of just like seeing like kind of like letting the matrix, just kind of like seeing through the code.
kind of, and also like getting to this point where, frankly, I was a little embarrassed to be in the game design industry for 20 years and not be able to answer like some really basic questions about some very popular titles or genres because I was so tunnel
Mm-hmm.
visioned in the stuff that I was working on. So once I was sort of becoming a little bit more curious because I was working with these mobile studios, I was working on Magic, and they have a very different design and development process than the places I've worked with historically. There got this sense of like, oh, there's probably a lot of information. Like there was the sense of like, if all the people at these studios could talk to each other, they would all
Mm-hmm.
probably do a better job. But there's just so much that's
Mm-hmm.
like proprietary knowledge or baked in, or it's just the way things are
Mm-hmm.
done because it's always been done. And I felt like I got this opportunity to sort of step outside of that a little bit and sort of just work on a bunch of different stuff and talk to a bunch of different people and learn a bunch of different processes and skills. And then Direwolf um, hired me back in July of 2021. And the way that I engaged with the game that I was working on, the things that I was thinking about were totally different than they were before. Of like, what are the areas for improvement? What should we be focusing on? It's like night and day.
Mm.
So, I think red pill is a kind of a reasonable way of describing it. Um, but yeah, it started sort of as this like almost self-preservation tool of like I had to widen my skill set to just being like
Yeah.
just like the seeing different things and being able to draw through lines between different things started just interlocking to me in a way that it didn't before.
That's so rad. What would you say is the biggest, if there even is one, because this is kind of, I don't want to say, you're on the frontier, but maybe you are. But what would you say is like when you talk about this and bring up this idea of, finding through lines and finding, kind of analogous circumstances between games and IPs, what would you say is the biggest misconception by the people that you hear talk about it or voice their opinions or that you've talked to about it with?
Hmm. I guess there's like so it's great for people to be invested or for people to be super invested in whatever the thing that you are working on is, but you do actually have to sit down and do the math, actually do the math or like figuratively do the math of
Mm-hmm.
is servicing this demographic actually better than improving the new player experience or making the creative better or making the art better or making the flavor text better. Like it is very easy to fetishize your top 1% of investment, both because if you work in games, there's a good chance that you yourself were once the top 1% of something or other. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, because they're going to be your most vocal people on social media, it's easy to have those like sort of biases baked in. That's not to say you hand wave it either. There are times where serving that group actually does make sense in discrete moments. Um, but it's not enough to develop a philosophy about it one way or the other. You actually need to sit
Mm.
down and sort out what are the costs and benefits of different paths.
That's so cool. It sounds like a very like if this was done years ago, there would be a lot of, um crap. I just literally forgot what the old term was for a calculator. But it sounds like you'd kind of like you'd just be kind of looking at like almost like a notepad or like, a ledger, and you just kind of, okay, we're ticking this box, but we're giving up that box. But to get this box, we have to, pick up this box and like so on and so forth.
So
That's so fascinating.
an example of this was I was working on MH2 for Magic. They had me kind of more in the pipeline for that set than for others. And
Mm-hmm.
in like your normal standard level release, like they put a premium on like the colors being balanced. That makes sense. You don't want the formats where it's like, yeah, obviously black is the best color. It supports six drafters at a table. It's not really fun. It's repetitive. The incentives are perverse. All that. So they're
Mm-hmm.
about to break for an MH2 draft, and I go, my one little bit of unsolicited advice here is like, don't get too hung up on the color balance. Focus more on novelty. Does your deck do something cool? Do you see your opponent's deck and you're like, oh, that's cool too? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a draft format where it's going to cost like $40 to draft. So few people are going to do more than one of these drafts or even one in the first place that
Yeah.
is something cool is more important to me here than are the colors balanced. And that was sort of
Mm-hmm.
just and I don't really know what ended up happening with that or if they took that to heart, but that's just like an example of you can't just be on like just repeating the same thing over and over again as things change, as the circumstances change. You need to like update it and actually look at what that looks like and what you should be valuing, even if you take it as a truism that like the color should be balanced or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense that like the more important feeling is coming away feeling like you've enjoyed this and it was unique as opposed to, well, everybody got their, little bit of, sandpaper or whatever like that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, did you spend $40? Did you feel like you did something cooler than when you spent $15 on the standard draft? That's the
Yeah.
thing. The standard draft, people are going to do it over and over again. And if in week 6 everyone knows that red's just the best thing, well, that sucks. You should make some effort to avoid that. But when you're talking about something like
Hmm.
MH2, it's not going to go that way. People are not going to draft it for that
Yeah.
long at that sort of frequency. So just make sure that you're actually seeking out the things that are important based on these parameters versus the others.
Hmm. Is there a non-obvious aspect to this, for lack of a better term, like avenue of like game design and creation that you'd like to try and explain to us muggles?
Hmm. So I think there's um, for obvious reasons, people talk a lot about how powerful the cards are and that being sort of the thing. And
Hmm.
that is a lot of the thing. And it's not to hand wave balance or whatever. But for me, I'm a really big believer in paying people out on a variety of axes and just allowing sort of the
Hmm.
synergies and interactions to manifest from there. The cards that I find to be the most offensive are not necessarily the ones that are the strongest, but the ones that are
Hmm.
really strong and are just paying you out on one line. Um, I think Goblin Guide is an example. I think Treasure Cruise is an example. There's a variety of others, but basically the more that what makes this card good is it's like it does A, B, and C, and there's just enough rake there to get the thing over. And it's interesting to like combine cards with it in various ways. That to me is like the secret sauce. And
Yeah.
I think too often in card game history, there's been too much time spent on how do we balance Ancestral Recall or how do we balance Fire Blast, and not enough attention given to how can we make this card that's like ETB scries and it has flying, and at the start of your turn it does something small or whatever, such
Hmm.
that it's more about creating dynamic situations and incentives and like games that are different, and not like is one person just on the gas pedal the whole time doing one thing.
Yeah. It's kind of like, this is going to be really reductive, but it's kind of like why chicken's the best meat, right? So you can do so much with it.
Right.
It's like so universally used, so like it's low resource to create. There's many different flavors that you can do with it. It's not an overpowering taste. It's got really low calories. It's like good for this, good for that, but at the base of it all is you can do anything with it. And it's very cheap.
The criticism I give at work, um, whether we're talking about our own stuff or Magic or other games or whatever, the most like scathing criticism I give, but it's kind of like summarizes my feelings on the matter about a lot of
Mm.
different things. Is this looks like a card made by someone who does not believe the game engine is fun, like complicated and sort of self-contained in a way that I do often think it evinces that like yeah, normal people just don't have fun playing with the normal cards. Like we got to do
Yeah.
something really like fancy and quote unquote interesting here for people to have a good time. And I just
Yeah.
don't believe that's true about the game engines that are good. Like if you give some 2/2s and some 3/3s and to some people, and the one person has a giant growth and the other person has some mana up and some cards in their hand, it's like that game is fun. That game is fun for people
Yeah.
for 20 or 25 years. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of designs that I see, and it's not just like a Magic thing. I think we're responsible for this too sometimes, and certainly in other games of just like it doesn't look like the person who made this believes the game's fun. And
Mm.
I
They feel like they have to like reinvent the wheel for the car to go anywhere.
right, or like that the game engine isn't robust enough to make the game fun on its own organically. That there needs to be
Hmm.
something sort of subsidizing it on that level. And
And it needs a new paint job.
yeah, and it's like, no, I believe the game's fun and we should make cards that are fun and
Hmm.
cards that are fun for people who do things other than think about the game all the time. and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be Necropotence or Yawgmoth's Bargain for the game to be significantly complicated for the best of the best to also find it stimulating.
Hmm.
A lot of really smart people, a lot of really good Magic players love to draft, and that's just playing with hill giants and giant growths. Doesn't have to be. You don't have to fetishize the complexity for its own sake of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving from something you're passionate about to something that just drives you crazy. P. Sully, what is your preposterous peeve?
Uh, People doing acts of personal hygiene where there is a loud scraping noise has bothered me very viscerally since, like, literally I can remember to present day. So emery boards, filing your nails, or someone using like a non-electric toothbrush and just like going to town, I like can't be in the same room with it. That is my weird pet peeve. And like I said, like since I was 5, I can never
Yeah.
remember not feeling that way about it.
So, how does that work with you if you use an emery board or brush your teeth, for instance? Which I hope and assume you at least do the latter.
Yeah, I do. So I don't like the feeling of emery boards, so I just, clip my nails other ways. Me brushing my own teeth does not bother me. It's just the sound of someone else doing it.
Do you have a story when this peeve shown the boldest?
I remember I was like sitting with my mom in the grown-up bed watching a cartoon and like getting to be up late as a treat. And my mom started to like file her nose with an emery board, and I just like went to bed by myself. Like at this like
This is
special
like
room.
age like 6 or 8 or something.
4 probably, yeah. Just of like I'd rather just go to bed than be around this noise, and I don't have it in me to like argue about it. Yeah.
That is probably the best testament to how much it drives you crazy is at a young age the idea of like it sounds like you had the similar idea to me that like staying up late was cool and like a rare treat, and you have this opportunity and it's like yeah but and you have to like suffer through this torturous thing. It's like that bad that you're like nah son,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm just going to bed. Yeah, exactly.
Is this something that you suffer through when like your wife or your kids do this, or is this something that you intentionally like leave the room? Like how do you kind of deal with that peeve since it is such like a daily activity
So,
in your like everyday life?
uh emery boards I basically just leave the room. Toothbrushes, like everyone's got an electronic toothbrush, and I just like find that noise to be a lot less irritating, so it doesn't really come up.
Mm.
But yeah, if the emery board is being busted out, I usually just go to the other room for a little bit. Yeah.
Do you have really strong hearing, or is the noise just that sharp to like to your ear?
My hearing's not that good. I mean, it's fine or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
I have some hereditary disposition towards poor hearing, and um, I often don't like can't make out what people are saying. So I would guess for a 40-year-old, like slightly below average hearing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, it's not that.
Oh, that's crazy. All right. Well, with that, we're going to head to our second ad break, but don't go anywhere because when we get back, P. Sully's going to enter the lightning round. Hey, you. Yes, you. Yes, I'm talking to you. Have you ever wanted to record audio? Or perhaps fiddle with recorded audio? Maybe even record audio of a fiddle and then fiddle with said audio? Well, now you can with Audacity? With all the run-of-the-mill bells and whistles, you'll be confusing yourself with the tech in no time. But won't that cost lots of money? Because with my snow-blowing habit, I can only afford it. Ain't gonna cost shit. Audacity is free and easy enough to use that even a snow-blowing son of a gun can use it too. And we are back. Patrick, are you ready to enter the lightning round?
Lightning round?
I think so. You know me, I blather a bit, but I'm ready. I'm gonna give it a shot. Do my best.
All right. Put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. Patrick, is there a price for you to give up your passion forever?
Yes.
Make the food or do the dishes?
Do the dishes.
Are soups smoothies?
No.
Vests or opera gloves?
Vest.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
Yes.
Are you out of touch, or is it the children who are wrong?
I'm out of touch.
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body, or Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body?
Shakira voice, Danny DeVito body.
Would you rather have your inner monologue sound like Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher?
Fran Dresser.
Would you rather read the cue cards while wearing the crown, or live in a hovel and speak your mind?
Live in a hovel.
Do you create your own thoughts, or do you just listen to them?
Listen.
You're having the best day of your life. What happens next? Another amazing thing or something terrible?
Another amazing thing.
Pineapple on pizza or fist fight?
Fist fight.
You come across a stranger just struck by a car. Their dying breath is this. This is very important. Please tell my wife she's a dirty harlot. Do you or do you not tell their wife?
I do not.
Could you eat 37 of your favorite food for $5,000 in a 1-hour time limit?
No.
Congratulations!
You survived the lightning round.
But before we move on to your prize, I, like many listeners at home I'm sure, would like to now know, what is your favorite food?
Think probably honestly pizza.
Yeah, 37 pizzas is a bit much. 37 slices of pizza would be a bit much. Holy shit.
Yeah, I think I tap out with some medical enhancement at around 6 slices, so 37 sounds impossible.
Are you a Chicago or a New York pizza guy?
Well, one style is where I grew up and the best in the world, and the other style, the other style is lasagna in a trash can lid. So, New York, I guess.
I mean, trash can lasagna doesn't sound too bad. I'd probably eat that.
I've actually started to warm up a little bit to Detroit style. That's actually been, yeah, they got something going on there. But Chicago, just not even, like, nah. That to me is, like, borderline offensive to put them in the same breath.
To call it pizza.
Yeah, that is gross.
It's basically pasta.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Now that you've survived the lightning round, what lightning round question would you like to ask me and in turn be asked of future guests?
Do you watch and or enjoy professional wrestling?
No.
Okay.
I'm a bad person.
No, I didn't say bad because it is transparently silly and often racist and misogynist. So it's not like some personal failing to not engage with it, but there is so much, to me, very fascinating in the way that, like, performance art with fiction, with nonfiction, but it's blurry, meets like story, like arcs of storytelling with sort of spontaneous moments of needing to come up with things on the fly, where everyone is ostensibly like a character on a show, but also they're personally invested in their own success, even if the thing is all scripted. Like, it is such a just like bizarre confluence of different things that I think I find it to be really fascinating. But also when and another adult says, "Wow, you watch professional wrestling? That's really weird." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It is weird." Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, it's not any like I'm not, I just don't, somewhere between it's not my thing and I don't have the time for it. I'm not okay with somebody saying that's weird, because to me, it's no weirder than, somebody enjoying watching a sitcom or something like that. Like, you can start to get into like weird divides when you talk about like kind of high art. I think that's when it starts to like bend a little bit for me. I still think it's very much in the conversation, but when somebody's like, "That's weird. What are you going to do?" "Oh, I'm going to go home and watch The Simpsons." It's like, how is me watching wrestling any weirder than like you watching The Simpsons? That's something that's like a pet peeve of mine forever, is this idea of like gatekeeping what is and isn't art or weird. It's kind of just like, like, oh, you play Magic, you're weird. It's like, I'm sorry, what are you gonna go do? Oh, I'm gonna go do a sports draft. It's like, how am I less or more weird than you? Like, what? Who decided that like this is weirder or stranger or like more acceptable or less acceptable? It's just there's more people that do it, and somebody decided that it's like funnier to punch down on like a joke on TV or something.
So I think
I don't know.
I think what makes I think that's all true and well said, sort of broadly. I think what puts professional wrestling in a slightly different place, and this is coming from someone who is a professional wrestling fan, is um the suspension of disbelief, but like the product, like the product itself, sort of vacillating between sort of presenting itself as real and also like winking to the crowd and audience a little bit of like, yeah, we do know that it's made up, is like that is a weird dimension to it that is not shared by like a sitcom, which is sort of like transparently a work of fiction and never presented as anything different. But I do agree, generally speaking, that it's like, person making fun of sports ball. It's like you watch shows that have dragons in them. Like, who's cool? Why is one of these things like obviously?
Yeah. Why can't we just both like our shit?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think professional wrestling is like basically whenever I meet someone who doesn't seem like an obvious just like chud who's like, yeah, I also watch professional wrestling. I'm like, oh, I'm not saying we necessarily have things in common, but there are probably some ways in which we are fellow travelers,
Yeah. All right, man, as we come to the end of our time here together, anything you want to plug, shout outs you like to give, places people can find you or your content?
I don't even know if I make content anymore. That's complicated. Well, you can find me just posting and being terminally online over at Twitter at Basic Mountain. Again, I don't want to make too much of this because we've said this a million times before, but we are tentatively approaching, Cedric Phillips and I, towards relaunching the receivables in some form or fashion, or whatever we have to call it for branding or legal reasons. I'm not super sure, but for people who are asking about the podcast, it is not shuttered. We have a lot going on. We have some ambitions about doing things a little bit differently, so we're trying to get our ducks in a row, but it's not like we're never doing it again and not just breaking the news, not the sort of thing. Want to shout out my kids. Y'all cool. Woo. Yeah, you're great. All you're great. if by some chance you listen to this now or at a future time, your dad loves you, and that'll pretty much do it for me, I think.
All right. Do you have any friends or family that you'd like to nominate to come on this podcast so they too can suffer as you have today?
Well, I wouldn't say suffered. This was a good time. But Cedric A. Phillips, you can find him over at Cedric A. Phillips on Twitter, and he would then also be able to plug the podcast, probably with a little bit more information or details, which is known as building up momentum, which for someone with his passion about marketing, he would clearly understand. And so it could be fun and high leverage for him as well.
Cool. Well, thank you, Patrick, for being my guest today. And a special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And thank you, yes, you listening at home, wherever you found time to appreciate this. Time is the most precious commodity we have, and I appreciate you spending yours with us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, or just share it with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry. We put out a new episode every Monday at midnight on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast. And a very special thanks are due to our Patreon patron, Sibeliello. And if you'd like to join said illustrious ranks and have your name read aloud, just head on over to patreon.com/Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. And remember, folks, you don't fiddle with fiddles, nor should you smack a yak. So why then do we put fishes on dishes?